Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, June 4th, 2014, and this is DCMOOC week number 4, one of our core sessions, and this is actually one that I did last night. So if you're here twice, you're probably here to go a second time through the resources. We had quite a few people out last night, smaller one today, but this is why we offered a couple of times, just to make sure that it's convenient to everyone who wanted to participate. So I'm going to start off with, by the way, there's a Google Doc for this session. When we come to particular resources, we will tweet them. Joanna's going to help me today, and not tweet them, sorry, put them out in the chat. Feel free to let us know where you're from today. So if you don't mind, just let me know where you're from. You can use the chat. It should be okay. And one of the things that you should know is you can actually move the chat window to any part on the window. So if the chat goes by too fast, you can actually move it and resize it and move it. So if you want to let us know where you're from today and what you're up to, and if you can hear me okay, I don't see much chat going on yet. Who's going to be the first to break in the chat today? Or am I not just seeing this properly? I see some people ready to chat. See some more people joining. Here we go. For some reason, it is going in separate names under your tab. Oh, okay. I'm not sure what that's all about. Can you see? Are you able to see the room? Oh, yeah, that's strange. I'm not sure what's happening. Let me see if I can fix that. Something's happened with the chat for some reason. Give me 1 second. That's never happened before. Yeah, I see a bunch of different chat windows opening up rather than one main room. I'm going to just see what, this is really interesting. That's not nearly as fun. I'm going to fix that just to make sure that we can somehow fix that. It ends up being going in under different rooms here. So I've never seen that issue before. So give me 1 second if I can figure out a way to fix that. Chat. Show sidebar. Let's see what's going on. Okay, try that now. See if we can go back to the room. I think the wrong permission was off. There we go. Sorry about that. That makes so much more sense now and it's much easier. Sorry about that. Sorry for the inconvenience. That was really odd. One of the chat permissions wasn't on, so I guess it forces people not to be able to chat, but just to send me a message. Here we go. I think that should be okay. Woohoo! Strangest thing I've ever seen. But I guess it was just a simple permissions thing, so I was able to fix that. So, well, welcome again. It's great to see people from all over the place here and partaking in digital citizenship. So if you missed it already, I'm going to basically post in that Google Doc. This will give you all of the information from what we're going to talk about today. So that's kind of the short version of it. I also want to let you know that if you missed this session or if you missed any of the other sessions, there is a great place on the DCMOOC site under /archives, which I've also pasted there, that you can actually re-listen to this or listen to any of the other sessions at your own time. We've provided now, and we're going to try to get better at this, to make sure that there's YouTube versions of this as well as audio-only versions of this as well, so you can go back and skim through things. There is a Blackboard version, so you'll be able to actually find out everything that you can see here, but with the YouTube version, you can't see everything. You can't see the chat and that sort of stuff, and sometimes it leaves you wanting for that sort of thing. So again, thanks for coming. So I want to talk about first-year learning, just kind of catch up, because this is part of an ongoing course that many of you are participating in. If you're just a drop-in today, that's great too. So I want to ask you a question first. So what did you learn this week? It could be about digital citizenship, but I just want to, I think it's a really important question that we don't ask ourselves enough as educators. So if you want to either feel free to write on the whiteboard if you want to do it that way, or just feel free to just add in the chat. What sort of things did you learn recently? Significant things that you might have learned. No problem. Never late to join, for sure. Great to have you. So did you learn anything new, whether it's tips to improve my online courses? Okay, awesome. I mean, I'm trying to do that all the time. I'm watching, one of the things that I do is I actually go into a lot of different MOOCs, for instance, and try to get into a number of them and get a sense of how people are actually offering them. I'm a big online dropout. Reddit's complicated. So one of the things that we're actually going to mention today is there's a great book by Dana Boyd, which is it's called It's Complicated, which is one of the best treatments, I think, of teens and tweens and what we're learning about them in terms of using social media, and we'll talk about that a bit more as well. You're going to make a treasure hunt to encourage kids to look at course outline timelines. That's cool. My son came to change his age in his profile. I can change his name in his profile on Google+. Lost 20 years or so yesterday. Learn from Dean Shareski the power of video and audio versus text only. Dean Shareski gives a dynamic and dynamite presentation, so if you missed that session, it might be worthwhile. He even created a video on a golf course. And some of the things that he's done in his class is using like little videos to give little messages to his students have been phenomenal. It's been really great. So if you missed Dean Shareski, you may want to look at that. Another question I'm going to ask is, some of you are already answering this, but what will you do with what you learned? The things that you're learning right now, what you learned this week, what will you do with them? Whether it's something personal, whether you'll incorporate it into your learning. Like, for instance, the comment earlier about what you learned about teens and tweens online. What can you actually do? There are lots of MOOCs available. I think I just tweeted something like, I don't know, 80 different MOOCs that are starting in June alone. Lots of them available. You know, some of them are pretty out there in terms of very specific about particular tools or subject areas. Even this is fairly specific, but some of them are fantastic. And there's a lot of different levels. I ran into one great one that was an algebra MOOC last year, which would have been appropriate certainly for maybe grade 10, 11 students. Although it was meant that university entrance, it actually had some really good stuff that would have been great for high school. So that's a really great thing too. Be a better forming parent for sure. Help students become aware of the importance of being digital citizens, I'm assuming. Change how I approach questions about their online interactions. Yeah, very good. Share with staff and students to inspire positive digital footprints. I hope that's a really big part of this. How to develop e-portfolios with classes in the coming year. I hope you got some practical tips on that. Share my copy of Digital Leadership with my co-workers. That's the Eric Schenniger who joined us this week, wrote that particular book, which is really great. Be better informed parent for sure. Use knowledge for PLE development. Lots of great stuff. Awesome. Okay, so thanks. So let's get into some new learning. Now, some of this will be new for you, and some of it will be new for others. But here, I actually broke down. If you look at the Google questions, we broke it down into 3 main questions, and I thought that this presentation would make sense if we kind of framed it within those 3 key questions. And really, our theme this week is resource sharing around digital citizenship, because obviously this is, taking a course like this, it's never really over. Things are changing so quickly that we want to have ways of actually learning more about what we need to know. So the first question is, as educators, how do we become and remain digitally fluent and knowledgeable about the emerging digital world that students already embrace? So this new digital world, which we often call the 21st century, if we're talking about 21st century literacies, how do we actually, keep up to date? So one possibility up there, ask the kids to share with me what they're into, and that's a big thing. Even with my 9-year-old who's turning 10 right away, which scares me. Even my 6-year-old has a lot to share in terms of the things that he's doing. Develop educational resources for math and physics learning. It is a difficult question, and I'm going to try to give you some places to start within my next few slides. Keep up to date with the IT teachers, and I think IT teachers do provide a lot to share. Sometimes they can be more into the computer science side of things, or depending on what mode the IT teachers are in. But I think really that we need to integrate it across all teachers, in terms of, technologically, to be technologically fluent, I think is really important, or digitally fluent, versus just digitally literate. I think we have to start thinking about the ceiling versus the floor. Listen to the student, ask them questions, absolutely. Online communities, Twitter hashtags, EdTech, thanks Susan. Networks, networks, as Jordan says. And I think that's where we're going to end up near the end. Be willing to tinker, absolutely. And as MOOC, I hope this is a place where you can find some of this stuff. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. So some of the things I might suggest you read. And Joanna's going to place some of these in here. And the very first one, now this is someone that's going to be very familiar to many of you, but I think it's worthwhile going through the 9 themes of digital citizenship, which I think are also called the 9 elements. So if you haven't read this already, I think it's a good place to start, because this provides you with a lot of different places you can be thinking about sort of the breadth of digital citizenship. And it's not just, some of the stuff we've talked about in this MOOC have been a lot about things around identity, but there's actually a lot more to it. So for instance, I think a big part of digital citizenship is digital access, that the assumption that people have access. There's the assumption today that we need access to be successful, to be prosperous, to be educated, all of those sorts of things. And we often talk about the thing like the digital divide, which I think is really important to understand. So, do we work towards equitable digital rights, and do we support electronic access for all? And where do we actually put up blocks? And this could be anything from thinking about how we allow students to do things in our classroom, in our school, in our districts, but it also could mean things like the Arab Spring, where we see countries banning digital technologies. It could also mean things such as we're seeing things around, you may have heard the term net neutrality. Net neutrality is something where they will give, ISPs decide which services get fast lanes to the internet versus other places where, the democracy of the web is being taken away, that the person who has a blog doesn't have the same access to an internet, such as something like Netflix. Things like, what do we have access in terms of copyright, and what's blocked from us, and what can we do on the web? So there's lots of things around there that are really, really important. And of course, there's a literacy around, many kids getting around these digital access restrictions, especially with filters and so on. What Aaron mentions, like watch for BYOD, where kids are encouraged but they can't submit. That's an important piece. Many times kids are bringing things to the classroom, but they're not able to use use their devices for whatever reason, whether it's philosophical, pedagogical, or technical. Digital commerce is becoming a real big thing here. Oh, Susan, that's a great site. michaelgeist.ca Michael Geist is probably the copyright expert, digital copyright expert, and copyright expert in general in Canada. He's sort of our Larry Lessig, and he's a fantastic voice on copyright reform and a critic of copyright movement. So if you don't follow Michael Geist, he is fantastic. Digital commerce, the idea of electronic buying and selling of goods. Learning how to be effective consumers in the digital economy by understanding the benefits and risks of online purchasing of goods and services. Internet scams, for instance, are really a big thing these days. I'm amazed by how many people, even very well-educated people, are perhaps not well-educated when it comes to understanding transactions and digital transactions online. Someone mentioned yesterday when we did the session, the concept of Bitcoin, an alternate currency that exists on the web, which is becoming quite popular, but also very controversial because in many cases it leads to the exchange of black market goods such as prostitution and drugs and the transfer of funds that are not taxable, for instance, and all sorts of things like that. So there's a lot out there to learn about in terms of digital commerce from a perspective of safety, making sure that we are financially sound from a digital perspective, but also in many other ways in terms of where we are merging in terms of how we actually will look at buying and purchasing things in the future, whether it's, now there's those, I think some of you might have used it, those little things that you put in your iPhones, and they're called Square, I believe it is, and it allows you to take a purchase from somebody using a regular iPhone, which is really kind of amazing when I see those things in different countries, especially like the U.S. I see them all over the place. Digital communication, which I think is a big part of this course. How do we? What are the new ways of actually communicating in classrooms? Where we used to talk about the telephone and the typewriter in classrooms, I think we should be equally talking about Twitter and blogging and those types of things and how they actually change communication in our classrooms. Really an important topic. I won't spend too much time on this because we've done a lot of this. Another one that's really important too, which I think is increasingly important, is the idea of digital literacy, the process of teaching and learning about technology and the use of technology. So understanding how we become info literate, media literate, and of course digitally literate, and how do we learn how to learn in a digital society? And to me, that means things like MOOCs. MOOCs are an emerging way of learning, which a lot of people have access to but don't really have the knowledge of. And I think that's an important piece too. So digital literacy, increasingly important, and something that we have to self-assess for constantly. Digital etiquette, electronic standards of conduct or procedure, ensuring people have responsible digital citizens who are taught how to behave appropriately online. Of course, we've been trying to do this, just regular etiquette in everyday conduct, but it's becoming even more difficult online to understand who we're talking to, running into people who use anonymity for a bad way. This is really increasingly important to talk about with students who can blow their entire digital identity to pieces after a time, and I think this is really important to understand in big ways. So digital etiquette, digital law is becoming increasingly important. Deals with the ethics of technology within a society and the need to understand that stealing or causing damage to other people's work, identity, or property online is a crime. This is also something that we often use terms like piracy and online theft when it comes to copyright, when those terms may not always apply properly. So this is a big emerging piece. Of course, this is something that we often talk to students about, or we should talk to them more about. What are your rights versus responsibilities in this digital society? So this comes into play with things like, again, downloading someone's work and deciding to remix it. So what are the rights of the author? What are the responsibilities of the author? What are the rights of the consumer? And is there much of a difference between consumer and creator anymore? So this is becoming a big one too. And then the last one, quickly, digital health and wellness. I mean, there's a lot of things that are really interesting these days. Tools that attract us and lure us in. But what are they doing to our overall health? What are they doing to should we have screen time for kids under the age of 2? Many pediatricians say no. Others people say not so much. And certainly in terms of practice, it's very easy for parents to defer themselves, or rather than trying to keep a child entertained all the time, many will just be, I'm not going to say lazy, but perhaps they'd rather do something else at the same time rather than read a story. And what does that mean when iPads from a very early age are teaching our kids? And how do we balance some of these things in terms of a health and wellness, and certainly a cognitive development perspective, and there's all sorts of other issues. So something really important, and it's not just about ergonomics anymore. It's much more than that in terms of how it actually, the neuroplasticity of our brains is at stake here in many cases. This should be there. Another good one to look at. This is actually, and you can see where Joanna's actually tweeted this, or sorry, not tweeted this, added this to the chat. This is actually by, this is called Confronting the Challenges of Participatory Culture. And this is actually by Henry Jenkins. He's at the University of Southern California, I believe now. He used to be at MIT. Really great scholar on this. And it's a worthwhile read, and I'll explain why. What I like about this particular article is it talks about sort of the new affordances of the digital age. And he coins the term participatory culture, and he talks about this new participatory culture, and think of it kind of like YouTube, or what exists in YouTube when people are really connected there, or maybe Twitter, these social networks that are available. So for instance, he's seeing that within these participatory cultures, we see relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement. We see strong support for creating and supporting one's creation with others. We see informal mentorship in many ways. We see a place where members believe that their contributions matter. We also see a place where members feel that there's some degree of social connection with one another. And these are some of the same things we've been trying to build in classrooms for years and years and years. And this, in some ways, has emerged in a place where we have no control, like places like YouTube, et cetera. Now, that's not always this rosy. It's not always this wonderful place, but in many cases, these are the characteristics that we want for our classroom. So often we have to ask ourselves the question is, how do we take some of these, these characteristics in places where students and young people want to create, and how do we build that into our classroom? How do we leverage these type of characteristics of the new tools and affordances of these networks? And I think that's important too. One last read might be interesting. This is a free book. You can buy it if you'd like, but there's a free PDF that Joanna just dropped in there, and it's called It's Complicated. This is a really worthwhile book. Some of you read it, I know, and let me know what you think about it if you want in the chat. This is the rough contents in case you're wondering what's in it. This is, the first chapter is about identity, which I think is really important. I love this, the term there, or the sentence, why do teens seem strange online, which I've wondered many, many times. Privacy, why do youth share so publicly? And so it starts to break down things like the difference between private and public in terms of how we understand it versus the way that students understand it. And so this is a really, for teachers, to me, this is a must read. This is something that, to get a better sense of the students that you're actually understanding, so as Aaron mentioned, it does increase empathy, because rather than thinking these kids are just, they're entitled, spoiled, groups of people, you actually get to see, that it's not as easy as we often see. I'm not saying that you always think about that, but sometimes there's a mode of this new generation has all of these new tools, but they don't have a clue about what they have, and they're wasting time on their phones and so on. But I think this book, in many cases, gives a fairly balanced account of what students are. It's not saying raw technology, but it's giving a pretty good ethnographic view of what students are doing these days and why they're doing it. And I think that's really important. In terms of watching things, some of the things that you may want to look at, this is a great CBC documentary called Sexed Up Kids. This is not something I'd watch with kids, but it's something that you could certainly review with others. One of the things I like about this is it really hits hard on the idea of how new technologies and exposure to new content is affecting the relationships of kids and even their sexual development in terms of how they actually expect to connect with one another. And as a father of almost 4 kids, it's really an important topic for me, because I want to understand, as my kids grow up, how are they going to be connecting online? What are the expectations of both my daughters and my sons in terms of how they date and what the new protocols are and what the new technologies do, I think, in some ways. Another one that I think is quite eye-opening is something called The Sextortion of Amanda Todd. Both of these, I think there is a level of sensationalism in both of these documentaries, but I think it's up to us as readers to pick that out and be critical readers. But I think there's a lot to learn, even in this documentary, in terms of what new tools exist, what are some of the motivations of young people to share things publicly online, and what kind of trouble can you get into. And of course, in this particular case, I mean, there's a lot of there's parenting issues that are at stake here. There are law authority issues that are at stake here that contribute to this piece with the RCMP and so on. And I think there's a lot at stake. So how complex these matters can be, and I think in many cases this exposes much of that. So I think it's important to look at. Another great one to watch, this is called RIP, a Remix Manifesto, and all of these are free, of course. This is actually talks about copyright, we talked about this earlier, but it's really one of my favorites. It gets slow. There's pieces that are slow at times, but you know, even this manifesto, these 4 points here, really talk about the importance of a balanced copyright bill and balanced copyright pieces in society, and that there's much more to just, you know, people create things and you make money off things, that there is a new digital culture that allows people to create and remix and mash up different work in different ways. And in many ways, as teachers, I think what we've been doing with even essays for years and years and years have really been remixes. I mean, mashups of people's different types of thoughts that we bring to the table. But we've just been doing this thing in very much a literate way than a visual way. And so this is a really important one. There's lots of really great points in that video. Other places to explore, and this is actually some of my top websites for looking at digital citizenship and media literacy in general. Common Sense Media is a very popular one. It's from the US, but there's lots of good stuff that's relevant and much more general to kids. So a lot of good stuff there. Media Smarts, I'm happy to let you know that there's been an agreement with the Saskatchewan government, Ministry of Education, to license this in Saskatchewan schools. So you should soon find out how to do that. Like there's a lot of materials on the site that are free. In fact, you may want to look at the latest report, which is actually looking at how kids are connected online. There's some really interesting stuff around the stats around sexting. I think there is, for instance, there is one report that about 24% of kids from grade 7 to 11 have received a sext of someone from someone else. So I mean, it becomes a little bit alarming, but I think it's really important to get a sense of, you know, what the stats are. So this is worthwhile looking at, even for the free resources, the reports. And I like that it's a Canadian site, that they're, for those of you in Canada, we often get mostly US stats, which do apply it sometimes, but I think sometimes it's good to have those Canadian stats, and we need more research in that area. Another one that's quite interesting is the Pew Research Internet Project. Is another place where you go with a lot of statistical reports on sort of the general trends in technology. I noticed that Lisa's here. This is the same one you saw last night, by the way, if you missed it. Hi, Lisa. Great to have you. This is a repeat of last night. I'm not sure. I think you were here last night, or at least I saw you tweet last night. So if you're coming back again, that's great. This other one I think is worthwhile. Oh, okay, see. This is actually Google Trends, which if you haven't taken a look at it, they've been doing this. It was actually something called Google Zeitgeist years earlier. And I kind of like this because it gives you a sense of kind of a snapshot of humanity. I think Google tells us a lot about what people, what the top stories were, what people appreciate and what they're interested in. And so it's worthwhile so there is an infographic of the latest report. Sorry, that's on the Media Smart site. Thanks, Susan, for that. Another one that I think is useful is, Wikipedia in general. In this particular instance, I've actually linked to, what is a viral video? Like, we talk about things like viral videos all the time. Our students talk about these things, and we use it like it's been a term that's been used for a long, long time. And I think sometimes, using something like Wikipedia or Know Your Meme, for instance, allows us to get a better sense of what exactly are these things from a more substantial perspective, in understanding what they are, where they emerge from, what they mean, how they become viral. And I think we can do that with a lot of different tools. Sorry, with a lot of sort of the internet jargon. And this is another site that I think a lot of students use. This is not something I'd share specifically with students, because there can be sort of crude comment, commentary and so on within this, especially for young students. But Know Your Meme is kind of a neat site, because what it does is it looks at some of the latest trends, whether it's YOLO or Gangnam Style or whatever it may be, and it gives you a snapshot of where these things emerged from, when they were popular, why they were popular, where they were popular, and so it really kind of gives you a sense of sort of some of the latest trends, and it kind of helps you speak teenager in some ways too. So I really quite like it. So beyond some of those things to read and watch and explore, I think it's also useful to think about some of the tools and strategies that can be used with students to model digital citizenship. And I think this is probably one of the key pressure points that we provide in classrooms to really get a sense of, students need to see us using digital tools in ways that make sense, that are educational, that are for our own learning, that we model our learning, that we make it visible in the classroom. And I think this is really key points for this. So I would suggest, and of course you can add your own if you think of things that we can engage in, things like Minecraft in education. I don't know if you still have it, Joanna, but Joanna shared a great video with me earlier on students using Minecraft in education. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but this, for instance, is a site you could go to, or if you just Googled Minecraft Edu or Minecraft in education, there's tons of different resources that are available that educators are starting to think about how we can actually use places like this in education. And if I think about my 6-year-old who's doing this and using Minecraft in a way that I think is really neat. So for instance, what my 6-year-old does is basically creates things, and he's already doing screencasts of things he's recreating because he's really proud of what he's recreating, and he's sharing his successes with the world. And I think that idea of being able to share things, our successes, is the same thing that teachers are doing with flipped teaching in some ways, where they're sharing their knowledge with the world and giving it to others. And 6-year-olds are doing this. And so there's a lot to be said here, and it's a really constructivist or constructionist environment that allows a lot of flexibility, and there's various subject areas which I think you can apply to building things within Minecraft. And there's a lot of affordances that we probably don't look at in terms of the text that we can display, the 3D environments, all sorts of things within that. So take a look at that. Here's another, and I think one of the most popular tools we're seeing now is Instagram. My 9-year-old uses this quite often. Instagram is, and this is a Google Doc that's shared with you there. This is just some ideas on how you might use Instagram. What I love about Instagram is in terms of classroom environments. When we did this in a recent forum that we were at, because a lot of students were using Instagram, but to get their pictures to me, what I had to figure out is, okay, how did they do this? And all they had to do was use a hashtag, and by clicking on that hashtag, we were able to see all of their different creations, and all I could see was just the one they shared with the hashtag. And it was really neat to see students creating things from their perspective. Really easy way to share photos, and of course it does move towards a more visual way of knowing, or a visual literacy, and I think that's really important in terms of what we see today. Now, another thing that is similar, and of course, even if you use Instagram, there is a video feature now that you can record up to 15 seconds, but Vine is something that's been starting to be used a lot. Now, someone lamented last night, and I think this is a really important criticism, that Vine allows you to do video up to 7 seconds. I quite like Vine. If you don't have these tools like Vine and Instagram, I would really, in terms of kind of getting a sense of what's happening in classrooms and what students are using, if you've got a smartphone, these are things that you should try. They're worthwhile, and some of the creativity in Vine videos is just amazing. It blows my mind, because what you can do is record up to 7 seconds, but you can record things in little pieces, so you can create sort of almost stop motion type videos very, very quickly and efficiently and creatively in something like Vine. Or you can do the same thing in Instagram. It just gives you 15 seconds rather than 7 seconds. But there's a document there that helps you explore that if you like. Now, I think we need to leverage, and when I say leverage, I'm not a big fan of that term actually a lot, but where I see some of the leverage points are when we start to see students bringing in more devices, when we become more to that sort of promise of one-to-one through their own devices. I think we can use particular tools in some cases to leverage these relationships. Now, the ones I want to show you are more student response systems, and I don't think you use these for all things that you'd want to do in the classroom. I think there's much better ways to communicate, but in some cases, these are really good tools to use if the pedagogy is appropriate. So Poll Everywhere, I think many of you know what this is, but if you've never seen it, it allows you to participate using SMS or online participation. So you can put up a poll, and students, by typing in a code to a specific short code, and in Canada, I think it's 37607 or something like that. You'll find out once you sign up. You can use this in the classroom with up to 40 students for free. After that, it costs, but the free account is usually ample for most classrooms. And it's just kind of a new, cool little system that I've used a lot in a lot of the different events. Yeah, so Reagan's using it, using grade 9 math courses for pre-assessment. So I think that's really an important thing. And I think sometimes it surprises students that they can do something educational with their phones, and that, sometimes there's a novelty effect for sure, but I think if we use this stuff appropriately, it works out in different ways. Another one where, and this is something I'm using with my undergraduates, is Remind 101. And this is a tool that allows you to basically have students subscribe to a group. And then what you can do is they subscribe. So first of all, they subscribe to their phones. And then what you can do is send them messages. It's like one to many. So I can send a message from any of my devices to all of their phones through SMS. It's a really nice service. You can time them as well. So for instance, I know I've been in different time zones, and if I've been down under, for instance, what I might do is send a message to my students when I know I'm going to be asleep or something, and to give them reminders about things that they need to hand in, or give them just prompts and encouragement and other things, and it's been really kind of a cool thing. Yeah, as Reagan, or as Aaron says, the idea that it's not two-way communication actually satisfies a lot of the K-12 sector, because often parents don't want you, and there's actually some district codes that say, I just was in a school district in Ontario just the other day, that they don't allow texting with students. And really the idea there is that they don't want you to be in these personal sort of private message relationships. But in this particular tool, you're only sending them one way, and it's a mass communication to a number of different students, and they can't send anything back to you. So that kind of satisfies some of that issue there. So it's fairly easy to use. And for students who don't have SMS, there's an email option too. Socrative is a good one too. What I like about this one, some of the things that I've done in my face-to-face classes is we actually talk about class climate, which is basically, like, I ask them a question, it's a polling question. I say, what are the characteristics of the best classrooms that you've ever been in? And what students can then do is basically submit, like they may say they like humor, or they like engagement or interaction, or whatever else they may add for their ideal classroom environments. So you get a big long list of all these characteristics from various students, and then you can hit a button and you can actually get students to rate those responses. So then you get to see, like, what does this classroom actually like the most? Oh, it looks like they like humor the most in this classroom. And then you can start to help build a classroom environment. So I think the more that you actually allow students to develop the classroom climate environment, it really makes a big difference. Yeah, yeah, if they like taking polls, for sure. Yeah, exit slips, I think, Carol, that's another one that's been used a lot, where we see, for instance, and I really like that with things like Poll Everywhere, because, or Socrative, where it's anonymous, because sometimes people don't want to say what they don't know in front of a big audience. And so I found that a lot of students that don't like talking, you kind of deal with some of them in different ways, where you can actually use the anonymity and to allow more people to discuss things. And so sometimes if I ask an exit poll verbally, or a question verbally, like the question, does anyone have any questions? Sometimes I get no responses, but if I ask it through something like Socrative, it's amazing how many questions I might get and clarifications that are needed, because obviously I don't clarify everything very well. This is another one. You may or may not like it. It's Kahoot. It's similar, but this one is game-based, so it's kind of fun. I guess there's a competitive piece on it. Not everyone likes competition in education, and some people are very against it. but it's worthwhile looking at with this idea. It's called Kahoot. And so you can build tests or whatever else, and then you can basically run these in class, and then students can either get the right answers or wrong answers, but it's also, there's a timing piece. So obviously it's not always good in every situation, but it's kind of fun and students dig it, and it's worthwhile looking at it anyway. So it's, in certain cases, this might be okay. I'm also going to look at something like Voxer, which I'm seeing more and more teacher groups are using. What Voxer is it basically, it's like a walkie-talkie in some ways. So you can basically talk to someone like a walkie-talkie, so synchronously, or you can also send a message in the same exact way, but if the person on the other end is not there, it records the audio message for you, and so you can listen to it later. So this asynchronous piece. You can also send images, and it's also good for groups. So you can actually have, like, I know that some schools have intercom systems, walkie-talkie systems, or admins might have that throughout a district. And what you can actually do this is basically talk on your phone, and then you're talking to everybody. So everyone gets those messages. It's all kept in one little sort of thread. I use it for my family, which is kind of a lot of fun. Now, one of the things that was mentioned yesterday is what are those paper-based clickers? They're called clickers? Yeah. I'm going to find this. I don't have a slide for this, but when someone mentioned it yesterday, and I thought this was kind of cool because this kind of brings the digital access component to it. It's called clickers. And what clickers are, it's paper-based clickers. And it's kind of cool because basically, people who don't have phones, or maybe you don't want to use the phones, what you can do is, as a teacher, so you print these out. And so it's a single piece of paper that you print out, and then what you do is basically get students to hold it a certain way. So if you hold it one way, it's an A. If you hold it another way, it's a B. If you hold it another way, it's a C. And then what's cool about it is basically the teacher can scan these things quickly and then count up or tally up the votes. And so you have a paper-based clicker system that's fairly easy. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, it's Susan saying only the teacher needs a phone in this case. 3x5 cards, I guess that works too. Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure. So Clickers is updating to allow you to add question text. I've just learned about them like 2 weeks ago. So very new to me. I'm very new to some of this stuff. Edmodo, some people are using. I'm not sure how many people like this particular tool or not. It's sort of like a learning management system, but it's one you can control to some extent. It's very much like Facebook. Again, a lot of classrooms, I think, are using tools like this that they seem more like things like Facebook, but maybe you don't want to use Facebook or your district policy doesn't allow you to use Facebook. So it's kind of a fun little tool, course management system. As far as course management systems go, it does provide an added layer of safety. It also allows the ability to share your student profile with the specific parent. So parents get to log in and see what's happening in the classroom, what homework you have. So it's a good communication tool as well in many cases. And of course, if you haven't done this before, we have a Google Plus community for this MOOC, and some of you may be interested in things like Google Hangouts. If you've never tried a Google Hangouts, I would really, pair with somebody or a few people and try one out because they're really worthwhile. It's sort of like Skype, but you can do up to 10 people, and it's worth taking a look at. So I know a lot of people who spend a lot of time in Google Hangouts, and because it's got a text layer, you can share links, but you can also do things in terms of the video chats, which are a lot of fun. And it also works on a lot of different platforms. I did Google Hangouts for a class one night, and it was cool because I could see the student decided, well, can I go to like the hockey game and do Google Hangouts from there? So there this person was in class, but while he was at a hockey game, and I thought that was just fantastic. Yeah, as Aaron mentions, it can also record straight to YouTube. So if you do something called Hangouts Live on Air, I think that's what they're called. Basically what that does is it live streams it, and then it records it to YouTube automatically. So the live streaming is an important piece. So if you think of like if you got a panel together or people from around the world to speak to your school, it would be kind of a cool thing that you could actually do this. And there's no limit in the number of people that it can stream to, so which is amazing to me, really. So some of the things that you can, leverage, I think those are really important. Well, one last one. This is actually called Backdraft. I think this is the last one. This is if you use Twitter in the classroom, this is a cool little one, little app. It's from Purdue University, and what it allows you to do is basically you have to put your tweets in beforehand. So maybe you have particular questions you'd like to ask on Twitter using a specific hashtag. And then what you can do is when you're ready for that tweet, you can basically just click a button on the app, and that tweet is sent out there. So it kind of allows you to have a bit of a back channel, I guess. And some people really like using Twitter in the classroom, and this is a great tool for that. And I know several people who are using this in their undergraduate and high school classrooms. So it's kind of a fun little tool, and it is free. So that's kind of a cool one too. All right, so this is an infographic I created some time ago. This is sort of when I was contemplating, the idea of these online spaces, which are private and closed, versus online spaces that are also public and open, and trying to figure out like where do we go from here, and what is the role of school in helping students understand the complexity of these spaces. And so I was thinking, if you look to the left, we have the kind of the traditional online classes and traditional classes in general, which we have students basically in a classroom, and there's not, it's usually thick-walled classrooms. No one really knows what's going on. Sometimes we can invite visitors once in a while. Versus if you look to the right, you can get a chance of, these open classrooms where you might use Twitter or Facebook or do things like this where anyone can drop in and participate. So it's like basically like how do we get from one place to the other, and what choices do we make? What are the places where we can help our students understand that this conversation or this event or this experience should be private and closed versus this experience being public and open, and how do we make those choices? How do we discern the difference? And I think this is an important conversation with our students, and I think it's really great. I love the rah of public and open, and most of my career has been based on that. But I think it's also really important that we respect student spaces and their need to sometimes be private and closed. And of course, we have to have this decision because most of the stuff that kids are being born into today are much to the right side. The idea of kind of like the default in many ways is public. And I think we have to be very careful with that. And I think also in modeling, modeling, of course, and this gets more into the pedagogy of some of these tools. I do want to, there's a great video, blog post and video by a guy by the name of Dave White. And I know that you've probably all heard the digital natives versus digital immigrants argument that's been around for some years now. And a lot of people started to get to the point that they don't really like that anymore. Often, some of the criticisms have been is that we assume that students can do anything, that basically they're born with these rich digital skills and that we're just holding them back because we're immigrants. And that no immigrant can ever really change, that it's really difficult for us to do it. So to adapt some of these new technologies and learn some of these things, that we're basically lost cases by our very nature of being old, I guess, in that sense. So I think what I like about this metaphor, or this dichotomy here, visitors and residents, is basically, so he replaces the terms with visitors and residents. And so you can be a digital visitor or you can be a digital resident. I think many of us may be still visitors. I would call myself a resident, someone that kind of lives in these spaces, understands them, understands the communities. There are some people here that I would probably call that as well. It's not like that you're staying here forever and you don't enjoy the face-to-face company of friends, but you have a really good place in these digital worlds too. You understand, you have a home here in some ways. You know where you are online and how I can find you, and in very nice ways. So yeah, like a guest house, that's not a bad idea as well. So I think it's a really important metaphor to think about, and I really think it gives us hope rather than being simply digital immigrants. So one of the things that I've done, I've got an About Me page. This is something that you may want to consider to assess your online presence and to build sort of like your personal splash page. This is actually one of the first things that comes up when you Google me. And it's just kind of a nice little place that kind of lets me tell people where I am over the internet. There are things in classrooms that I think provide a lot of value beyond the actual value of the activity that you have in mind. This one's called Mystery Skype, which allows people, a classroom teacher, to Skype to another classroom. And this allows you to basically do kind of a guessing game to kind of figure out where the people are. Now, the activity itself is not the thing for me. What's really important here, I think, more important here, is the idea that you're actually interacting with people in a different place through online means, and that as a teacher you get to model that communication. And maybe you can make your, the information clear to your students that you met a teacher online through a service. You maybe checked out each other and made sure that it was the right fit, and then you decided to move beyond that particular place and decide to do a mystery Skype. So there's all sorts of things around that relationship that are really important that you can share with students. Now, another fairly popular project is something called quad blogging. Quad blogging, because some of the complaints of student blogging is that, one of the best things about student blogging is that students can potentially get an audience from around the world. One of the complaints is that they blog and no one reads it. So there's things like quad blogging, and basically the idea allows you to, your classroom sets up with 3 other classrooms in the world, and what you can do is basically, for 1 week, you are the writers. So one classroom is the writers, and the other 3 classrooms are the commenters, which I think is a really undervalued piece in the whole blogging, writing, reviewing, citizenship piece. Is commenting is essentially important, and it's in many cases more important than blogging itself, because it provides etiquette opportunities, it provides connection, it provides synthesis and understanding, and there's all sorts of things along with that. So basically you shift. So the next week another classroom becomes the writers, and then you get the other 3 are the commenters. And so you have a built-in audience. You have hopefully some cultural understanding that happens here, cultural exchange, all sorts of other issues that could be unexpected pieces. So I really like this idea. Yeah, and Erin, as she said, as Erin says, I agree, teaching appropriate questioning and responding is huge. Commenting is so undervalued, and it's so important. Now, there are other sort of more web projects that I really like. This one's called Dear Photograph. If you haven't seen the site, it's at simply dearphotograph.com. It's a web project that I've kind of fallen in love with. It's this idea that you basically take a particular image of something that happens in the past. So here's an example right on the front page of this girl who was once a child, and then she's taken this photograph and superimposed it on the same scene many years later where she is convocating. And I really love, I really love that photograph. And so it's just a really nice, 2-picture historical perspective that I really, really love. And this is one that's really easy to do for students. And in many cases, they come up with some creative stuff, and they're able to share that using the Dear Photograph site, or they can just keep it, just for a classroom photograph. I think that's important too. This is one called Young Me, Now Me. This is a site originally created by Zay Frank. And I love this project because it basically takes the idea of, taking a photograph of when you were young and bringing it to something, when you were older in that same pose. I did this with my family. Here's the 6 of us here at one point, and we found this old photograph, and this is, I don't know, this is probably 1977 maybe, maybe a bit older than that, 73 or 79 maybe. And then basically we decided, we all got together one day and we were all in the same room, and we said, I thought of that Zay Frank photograph, and I thought, why don't we do this? And so we just finally got together in the same way, and it's not nearly the same, but it just kind of got us together and trying to do the same thing that we did, and it was just kind of a fun thing. And it was like actually the last photograph that we had all of us together, and it's just really kind of a cool thing that you can end up doing. Another great site is something called Daily Create. This is by, I think, mostly CogDog, a guy by the name of Alan Levine, who goes by CogDog everywhere else on the web. This is the Daily Create, where every single day, there's a little creative assignment, and you can do it, if you want to do it and participate with this community, you just basically hashtag it with that particular day. Every single day is, oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you're using it, Erin. Like, it's great. It's fantastic. So it gives you a little bit of a fun little creative project every single day. And so if you don't like today's, you can go back a few years, a few days back, or a month, or a year. I think this has been going on for more than a year. Yeah, so the one, the screencast, it must be almost 3 years. It's just really kind of a cool thing, and it allows you to share your creation with a larger community. So it's one of my favorite sites. Really lots of great stuff here, and lots of really cool insight. This is a great site. This belongs to the same sort of class. This is the DS-106 assignment bank. So if you need if you need some support on getting students to do alternative assessments, doing things different than papers, this is a place where it's got lots of different, or what they say, an anthology of new media projects. And these are things submitted and rated by the community, the DS-106, or the digital storytelling community around this site, that this course that never single ends. By the way, if you've never participated in DS-106, it seems to be always happening, and it's a great MOOC to move over to. It's more than a MOOC. I think it's really a community, and I think it's a fantastic model for teaching and learning and sharing. If you haven't seen this, this is actually a great example, because I'm a big fan of things like lip dubs and projects that do remixes. Yeah, I believe so, Aaron. I think it's a great way to be current. So this is something called Holy Trinity style. It's basically Gangnam style. This is done by a French immersion school outside of Ottawa. It's all in French. A fantastic example of what you can do with a song to remake it, to really make it your own. Not just simply lip dubbing, but actually changing the words, doing something, remixing it, making it your own, and really getting the entire school community involved and having fun with it. This is just one of my favorite examples. If you want to do something that's more of a lip dub, we actually did one in my DCMOOC not too long ago, and we provided a how to do it. So if you're doing something like virtual where you want to get a lot of people involved, I've created sort of a step-by-step tutorial of how you can actually create a lip dub, which is kind of a lot of fun to do, and we've had a lot of mileage out of that. It was one of the best parts of the DCMOOC that we did last year. I'm going to shift just so you don't have to listen to me the whole time. This is actually a trailer from Dean Sharesky. I think I have that on document. It's a ECOM 355 trailer. Maybe I missed it. Is it there, Joanna? Yes, if not, I can find it. Google. There it is. So, Joanna, if you can click on the link that Joanna just linked to and watch the first minute. This is a trailer for a class, and I think it's a great idea. So, click on that link, watch it for 1 minute, come back, please. Thanks. So that was a one, and what was really great about that is Dean used a fairly easy tool to use. That was actually just in the iMovie now has some really cool stuff. It's like a trailer creator. You can get that either on the iMovie app or the iMovie app, I guess, the one for the desktop as well. So I really like that sort of idea. I've done similar things in courses that I've done in the past, and it's been really a lot of fun, and I think engaging, and kind of gives you the idea that you can have some fun with it to get people involved. And it sets a tone, I think, for the class that this can be also a much more media class. You can also embrace things like, embracing things like YouTube to be the norm, I think really makes a big difference too. So a lot of different ways we can model the use of technology, right from day one. And I guess, the big one here is this idea of, collaborating in, how do we collaborate beyond? And this is going to be the theme for next week, really, is how do we move beyond, learning more about digital citizenship in Saskatchewan, which is where the MOOC is targeted, but also, of course, we need to learn a lot from the entire world. So how do we develop, connections that go beyond this particular class? And what networks might we use? How do we share and curate resources? Regan's basically saying, using your PLN on Twitter, and I think it's a new term for some people. Is the PLN, or the Personal Learning Network, is a network that you sort of build and accumulate over time and maintain, and it's can be on Twitter, it can be on your blog, it can be through Delicious and Vigo and a lot of different spaces. But it's really it's a network that you build for your own learning and for you to basically contribute to the learning of others. So, I've used these graphics many, many times, but it's this idea that, for instance, we used to be as teachers, I think, and this is where my experience started in a classroom in Duck Lake, Saskatchewan, when I first started my career, that I had access to some of the curriculum documents and to colleagues and popular media, like things you would record by VHS, and maybe you got some print and digital resources, and of course, family, local community, people you can get resources from. But the world has expanded from those times where I was in Duck Lake and where you started your career in many cases to a more global network, and we have new tools that allow us to connect, whether it's blogs or wikis or digital photo sharing, or places like G+ and MOOCs and all that sort of thing. And so what it allows us to do now is move beyond our circle and connect with people that we never thought would be our best collaborators. Like some of the people that I connect to now are people that are very weak connections, people I get to know over time, people I read their blog, people who tweet something. And I think that's really an important piece, is that we move well beyond some of these tools, and then connect with people that may not necessarily be in our subject here in our school, but they could be someone globally that we connect to because they're part of our subject area. Yeah, no problem. You can use this anytime. I have them freely online as well. And I think it's really important to understand how we can connect to so many others out there. And this becomes, I think it's less of something that is something we can do, and it's something more, I see more and more something that we must do to really remain current and to be the best teachers we possibly can be, is to connect through these types of networks to develop and learn more and more about what's out there. And I think it allows us to, as a system in Saskatchewan or in our own district or our school, to bring in new knowledge that we may not necessarily be able to bring in some of the best knowledge and resources and plans and pedagogy and tools into our classrooms from around the world, and from people who have actually looked at a lot of stuff too. Not that we're not also sharing some great stuff too, but I think there's a lot to be learned from the entire world, I guess, the global world, in terms of how they approach education. There's lots to be learned, and of course lots to be shared with others. So this is a really great post. This is actually by Sue Waters of EduBlogs, and it talks about, like, if you ever wondered about, how do I actually create this PLN? So Sue has a step 1 to 10 approach, where it says, what the heck is a PLN? What is it that you want to know? How to use Twitter? How to make time to use your PLN? Because I think that's one of the biggest criticisms, is like, who's got time for Twitter? Who's got time for PLNs? How you can use blogs? How you can use things like Google. Now, iGoogle's kind of gone, but there's different versions of it out there, but it's worthwhile, right? Yeah, and I think that's really important. All time is made, not found. And I think that's a huge thing, that it's really a difficult thing. That's one of the biggest criticisms I hear about time and time again, is like, this idea of, how do you have the time for this? But it's the things that I give up. I think that it's really important. That does go with this idea that time is made, and it's made by sometimes giving up other things. Twitter, this is actually a great little site from David Truss, and it's like a step-by-step guide to Twitter. And so if you're wondering what a tweet looks like, what a hashtag is, and it's fairly new, and it's quite good, like why your profile is really, really important. This is a really good sort of beginner's guide to Twitter, and it's worth your time to look at. So thanks, Dave Truss, for providing that. If you're more advanced and you're wondering about how to connect to different hashtags, this is a really great document that kind of looks at hashtags from around the world. If you even did a Control F and started to find different things, so if you're interested in science, start typing in the word SCI, and you'll notice science chat or sci chat come up. Or if you're interested in geography, type in geo, and you'll be able to find that geo chat is like a geography-based chat. There's all sorts of different things out there, and understanding hashtags is such an important literacy, and it's something that we really have to consider, is how do we connect to people. There's been academic articles written. I think Christine Greenow from MSU wrote something on the idea of Twitteracy, sort of equating the idea of hashtags and Twitter to sort of a greater literacy or a new literacy. There's also a great Google Doc here if you haven't seen this. If you're in Saskatchewan, this is actually a Google Doc, and we're kind of crowdsourcing it to collect basically people from around the world who have, people who are in Saskatchewan who are using Twitter. And so if you click on that, there's actually Sask educators on Twitter. If you're not on there, feel free to add yourself. If you have a Twitter account and you want to follow a lot of those people, check out their profiles and see if they're still active. There's a lot of people that are very active on that list, so it's a good place to start. There's also there's a Google Plus community, as you know about in this class, and so if you haven't been part of that, we're hoping that the Google Plus community lasts well beyond the class, so feel free to join at any time, and even if you feel like it's late in the game, join it. I know people are joining all the time, and hopefully we can make that into a much more active and dynamic group, which will go as long as we want to go. There's also EdTech Saskatchewan, which I think is worthwhile, which is another one that you'll see in a second. That's another one that's more on the EdTech side of things that might be worth looking at. There's also hashtags. I've got the hashtag wrong here. There's actually, if you use a Sask EdChat, I think they changed it. So that's a Saskatchewan-based hashtag. So if you are from Saskatchewan, now there's also one that's in Canada. There's a Canadian-based one. I'll just go to that next article here. Here we go, which is like simply CDN EdChat, which is kind of a Canadian EdChat. And there's specific times on it, but if you're on Twitter, make sure you look up those things just to get a sense of what's out there. Now, that's kind of the list of things that I've got for you. Some of you have been adding a lot of stuff that's really interesting out there as well. This week, really, the big part of it, and if you look at some of the questions that we put in Google+, so we have put some questions in Google+, and you can answer those things in Google+. You can answer them on Twitter. Answer them wherever you want. I'll see if I can find where to answer, the actual, give me 1 second. So on the website, under Content Overview, there's something we've done every week, and it's called Weekly Prompts. And I'll just give you a link to that. So if you're interested in participating this week, if you want to add more to what we're talking about today, there's week 4, and there's lots of different ways to basically answer questions. So if you look at week 4, question 1, week 4, question 2, week 4, question 3, so there's only 3 big questions that we've asked, and you can either try it on Twitter or you can try it on Google+. So for instance, if you click on any of those hashtags on that page, that'll take you right to the hashtag. Now there's nothing there yet, but we want you to be able to do that if you want to answer on Twitter. I think a lot of it's happening in Google+, which is great. Some people are blogging about it as well, but it's also good to put your blogs there as well. Now next week, we're sort of concluding DCMOOC. It's been a great experience. I should actually go back to this week again. If you are interested, by the way, one of the representatives from, I think it's Matthew Johnson, is that the right name? I just want to make sure I've got his name. So Matthew Johnson is going to join us tonight from MediaSmart. So in 2 hours from now, at 7 o'clock Mountain Time, we're going to have Matthew Johnson, who's from MediaSmart. So he's going to take us through some of the MediaSmart's materials. And yeah, he's a director of education with MediaSmart. So if you want, in 2 hours, you can get a sense of what those resources are, what they have to offer, and he'll kind of take us through them. So feel free to join us out there. And I think in terms of tomorrow, I think the only big thing that we have on the agenda is we have a Twitter chat at 7 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time. Feel free to join us for that. It's been really great. We've had 3 weeks of great Twitter chats, and if you have never participated in a Twitter chat, then it's something that you can definitely look at. Well, thanks for that, Joanna. So that's for this week. Next week, we're going to explore sort of how do we continue to remain connected. Of course, continue on in the Google Plus and so on. But are there any questions right now? Are there any questions for what we looked at? Any specific questions? I mean, I went through a lot of resources. Basically, that's all I did tonight, and I tried to take some of your questions as we went. But do you have any questions or thoughts about what we're going through, and what other questions do you have? Of course, we have all next week to talk about that too. Yeah, I mean, the Creepy Treehouse, that was originally created by a guy by the name of Jared Stein. if you Google Jared Stein and find Creepy Treehouse, that's really an interesting piece. And so I think the premise of that was basically that we as educators sometimes use tools such as Facebook. And we say, hey, look everyone, all the kids are on Facebook, so what we should do as educators is create a place on Facebook where all the kids can hang out. And that's cool. Like, and he coined it the Creepy Treehouse because it's sort of like, we're creating something that's similar to what the kids want to hang out with. And I don't know, that sort of, the argument subsided over time. I think in some cases, some of the things I mentioned, like let's use Instagram, let's use Vine, use some of the tools that kids are using. I think in some cases that's become the norm. Not that kids aren't going back and using other things like Tumblr and things that we shouldn't use. There is, I think, what's interesting about, like I did mention Edmodo, which I think in some cases, Facebook has been tried in many cases to be used in classrooms. And a lot of kids are sort of getting away from Facebook because their privacy is not happening there. I've seen some fantastic uses of Facebook in the classroom that I can even forward. Mostly there are places where parents communicated about their children. I've heard of one in our province, for instance, that they're using Facebook for digital portfolios, which is kind of interesting. It's the first I've ever heard of that, but it's an interesting concept in many cases. So I think I've been certainly pushing the idea of using tools that kids use, but I think it's still an argument. Should we always go into places that, just because kids are using Instagram, should we try to leverage those? And that's one of the reasons I don't like using that term sometimes, leverage those particular spaces. I think it's still an argument. I think the argument subsided a bit. I don't know if there's been any resolution to it, but I thank you for bringing it up, Lisa, because I don't really know. Maybe we need to rethink that. I think it's something important. I've been typically in my classes, for instance, students, in many cases, sometimes they use the same Twitter profile, but certainly students are using a separate profile sometimes. I know that some school of thought by many educators is and people in schools, in schools of education, they're saying, all of our students should have only one profile, and that you should mix the social and professional and put them all into one. Others are saying you need to keep that separate. In fact, one of the school districts I visited last week in Ontario, there was policy that said very specifically that you need to have a separate personal versus professional profile. And then, but what was not outlined was what is personal and what is professional. What's an example, for instance, of a personal tweet? Like, for instance, I bought a pair of shoes. Is that a personal tweet? Versus I got married. Is that a personal tweet? Like, what exactly is personal? Especially when we look at, there's research out there, for instance, that says, and I don't know, it was not the greatest research, but the notion that profs, you've probably seen this, Lisa, profs that tweet personal things are seen as more credible by their students. Now, the research I looked at was a bit iffy, but even that idea that perhaps that if you tweet something personal, that students kind of get to know you a bit better and that you're seen as more credible and real, that's been something that's been happening in classrooms for decades. I remember the first time I ran into one of my students at the supermarket when I was teaching high school, and he looked at me like, "You shop for food? It's sort of like, you eat, you're human?" And then all of a sudden you get seen in a social context where you're sort of human, and I think it makes a difference in terms of how your students perceive you. And I kind of get that. So, yeah, shoes are important. Maybe we shouldn't be tweeting about shoes or ham sandwiches anyway, but I think in some cases, like, defining what a personal tweet is really difficult, I think. And that was, when I saw the policy, that was one of the first criticisms I had for the person, one of the people who were who had to market the policy is, so what about examples of what a personal tweet might look like? Because personal tweet may not mean the same as giving out personal identifiable information. I think that's a very different type of personal, obviously. And of course, yeah, because shoes. I don't know. It's interesting. So yeah, I don't know. That's great. So Any other questions, thoughts? I kind of ramble on if you notice if I'm given a question of some sort. Well, thanks, Allison. And we hope you can look at a lot of different resources. Hopefully there's a lot there to explore. So thanks for coming. If you're still here, you've already left. Yeah, some of these tools, certainly for creating educational resources and collaborative work, Google Docs is still one of my favorite tools for collaboration. I can't get enough of it still. You'll see several examples of linking to Google Docs there as well. So, well, if that's just about it, I really want to thank you. Well, thanks, Carol. I really appreciate that. That's great. The more we can offer, the better. And I think it's just great that sometimes, and I hope there's not tooting my own horn in the sense that sometimes there's online courses that are very, I guess there can be a bit more less interactive, and I think this hopefully gives a lot of people a lot of different ways to interact, and I think that's really, really important. And the more that we can share, the better. But ultimately, what really makes a great MOOC is the people, right? Well, thank you, Lisa. I think one of the but really when it comes down to it, the people that are in the MOOC and what they do and what they contribute, what they put in is really the biggest thing about this. And I think that's really, really huge. So, so thanks to everyone for being here and participating, and we'll make sure that the recording is up as soon as possible. So thanks everyone, and take care and have a great afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are, and be well. Take care.